77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Former aide to President and Vice President Lyndon Johnson, Bill Moyers, died this week at age 91. Moyers played an important role in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy because it was Vice Presidential aide Bill Moyers who gave the order to the Secret Service to remove the plastic bubble top from President John F. Kennedy's limousine, specifically shouting, "Get that goddamn bubble top off." Now that's strange because Moyers was a pastor. Those sound to me like the words of his boss, Lyndon Johnson. There is some misunderstanding. Descriptions of the removable bubble top following the assassination could give the erroneous impression that it resembled a clear plastic bubble, which was not bulletproof, but did not pose any impediment to an assassination's bullet. In fact, the top was more box-shaped and, aside from the side windows and a small decorative rear window, was covered in black vinyl, which would have made it impossible for a sniper to get a clear headshot at President John F. Kennedy. It was Moyers, the vice presidential aide to Johnson, who gave the order. I have this from two retired Secret Service agents who were there. Moyers would go on to play a vital role in the assassination, obviously, would later use his considerable connections to kill a British-based television program called The Guilty Men that was supposed to air on the History Channel in November 2003. The problem with this series was it postulated that Johnson was a major player in the assassination. It was Bill Moyers who enlisted the help of ex-presidents Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, as well as first Johnson's widow, Lady Bird Johnson, to move against the History Channel and get them to withdraw the movie. Even the New York Times commented, Bruce Weber, the New York Times, said at the time that it was very odd, not the least of which was because people involved, all who have seemed to have brought a great deal of thunder to bear on a controversy that probably would have disappeared of its own accord. But it's important, Mr. Moyers said, to put the public record straight. No, I'm afraid Bill Moyers went to his death knowing who really killed President John F. Kennedy. Joining me now to talk about that is Larry Schnapf. Larry Schnapf is an attorney who has been researching the assassination of President John F. Kennedy since the late 1960s. He is one of those who offered one of the earliest critiques of the Warren Commission's conclusions. He took a leading role in arranging a prominent mock trial for the accused assassination Lee Harvey Oswald in 2017 under the umbrella of Citizens Against Political Assassinations. And he has filed multiple lawsuits against the National Archives and the Biden administration to compel the United States government to release the remaining JFK assassination records. He's a frequent commenter on all of these topics, and we are honored to have him with us today. Larry, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, Roger. Thanks for having me.
So from the very beginning, I want to admit that you have really been an avatar of what needs to be released, and I think the most accurate critic of the releases so far. I think you and I would agree that Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna has done an extraordinary job of trying to ferret out the truth, particularly when the fact that she came to this job without a significant background in JFK research. And the orders, the first that I know to point out, the orders as issued to the National Archives by President Trump were really not broad enough, and they therefore allowed some in the deep state to hide some of the most crucial material. Tell us about that.
So, first of all, I agree with you 100% about Congresswoman Luna. You know, if Earl Warren had her dedication to the truth, we wouldn't be here. And she is a real fireball. And, you know, I have friends that go into her office, and when they talk about a document, she calls up the NARA or she calls up someone at the CIA and says, where is this document? So there are lots of people in the JFK research community who, honestly, you know, they tend to be Democrats, and they kind of they just attack her because she's a Republican, and you can see from the way the Democrats responded on the two hearings so far that they're not interested in the truth, and it's remarkable. But so the president's executive order should be construed to have required all of the records pertaining to the assassination that are in the possession of the federal government to have been released. And that's not the way the CIA is interpreting that order. And I'm really going to have to get Radcliffe or perhaps the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, Tulsi Gabbard's been doing a great job, but the CIA is apparently still, you know, resisting releasing documents. And, you know, either Luna's going to have to, you know, I'm really concerned that they're destroying records. And if Luna finds out that records have been destroyed, the next thing that should be done is that Congress has to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the government's performance with these records.
One of them, I agree with you completely. The other alternative, of course, is a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, but they seem to be a bit backed up there. I like the idea of a special.
Hands are full right now.
Yes, to say the least. One of the most controversial areas, there's several we'll talk about, have been the so-called Joanides records. Joanides was a CIA operative. He was really kind of represented the CIA during the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigation, which the CIA essentially stonewalled, turning over no documents and providing no testimony. The initial documents turned over regarding Joanides were described to me as innocuous. Now we hear that additional documents turned over show that he was running an illegal off-the-books operation involving Lee Harvey Oswald, who, of course, the CIA told us they had no previous knowledge of, as well as recruiting assassinators to try to kill Fidel Castro. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so we know that Joanides definitely, his responsibility during the HSCA days was to stonewall the committee, and the CIA's mission ever since Angleton in '64 was to run the clock out. So he definitely interfered with the HSCA. In fact, he took advantage of Blakey, who was the head of the committee, his naivety about the CIA. He didn't conceive the CIA could be, you know, not being up above board with him. And then even Judge Tunheim, at the last press hearing, mentioned that when they sought Joanides' files. Now, remember, Joanides was running the DRE, and the DRE is the one that was a Cuban exile group. They're the ones that almost immediately after Oswald's name got released on the day of the assassination started dropping stuff about Oswald's all his activities. So this was in the queue. So this group was the key group, and they were ahead of everybody on giving a biography on Oswald to paint him as a Castro supporter. But Joanides, the CIA told Joanides, the ARB, the review board, that the only files they had were personnel files, and they showed 44 pages or so, roughly around. And then the ARB said, okay, this is representative of those files. We're not interested in the rest of them. Well, now we learned that there was operational files that are missing from the very time of 1963 when Joanides was running the DRE. And that's what we're trying to get. And the word we got last week through Representative Luna is that the CIA is saying, well, we may consider releasing these on a case-by-case basis. That's not what the president's order says. They're supposed to release all of the records related to the assassination. And I can't think of any more records that could be related to the assassination than the Joe Anides operational files of his supervision of the DRE. That was the group that was interacting with Oswald in the summer of '63. They're the ones that got into the fight with Oswald in New Orleans. And so this is, for those of us who think that the conspiracy may have originated out of New Orleans, at least the operational phase, or this is an important area, and Garrison completely overlooked this area. So
I'm going to have to stop you there. We're going to be right back with more of Larry Schnapf in just a minute. We're going to take this quick commercial break.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. 77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.
Meta AI is the personal AI to help you with whatever you need. Plus, it meets you where you are. Not only is Meta AI now an app, but it's also on the apps you already know and love: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. Plus the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. It's easy to access wherever you are. So whether you're talking or texting, Meta AI is convenient to use throughout your day. Experience our newest AI that's tailored to you by downloading the Meta AI app. Try the Meta AI app today on the Apple App Store and Google Play.
Imagine this: the best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with attorney Larry Schnapf, who, to my mind, is literally one of the most knowledgeable people in the country about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and who has been a leading critic of the Warren Commission conclusions, as well as, I think, a critic of the way the government has responded to the order by President Donald Trump to release all the documents pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. Larry, I want to focus on two areas now. One of them is the role of organized crime. The House Select Committee in the late 70s, after an exhaustive investigation in which virtually every staffer had previous experience in investigating organized crime. One reason why I don't think they looked long or hard enough at the CIA, but they did conclude in their report that organized crime played a significant role in Kennedy's murder. Yet, to my knowledge, none of the documents that have been released to date pertain to the role of Carlos Marcello and others in organized crime. Is that correct?
So, the most important documents we're waiting for are tapes that Carlos Marcello had while he was in jail in what is known as the Camtech sting operation in the mid-1980s. he had befriended a person that became an FBI undercover agent called Jack Van Langingham, and they have hundreds of hours of recordings that have been sealed. Now, Jack Van Langingham came out and said that Carlos Marcello told him, that he had helped organize the assassination, that he knew Oswald, that David Ferrie had introduced Oswald to him, and that Jack Ruby was basically that he set up Jack Ruby in in Dallas, and that he essentially was running his bar, and that the Dallas police were all on the take. Jack Van Langenham also, so he sent some memos as well to the San Francisco office of the FBI, and when he apparently had cut a deal, and he was concerned that the FBI wasn't following through on their part of the deal. We need to have these records unsealed, and so the Department of Justice is actually the party that needs to do this. And I have asked in a letter to Pam Bondi to arrange to have these tapes unsealed, because we have to hear what Carlos Marcello actually said. I don't think the mafia could have been in a position to alter the autopsy. But I think Carlos Marcello probably helped pay for the operation, which probably was conceived at the operational level. And we also know that Carlos Marcello, his bagman for LBJ was this guy Jack Halfin, I think is his name.
Halfer, yes.
So there could be a connection between LBJ and Marcello. So there was one set of documents that were produced last month about Marcello, but they were limited to the efforts that the government was doing to try to prosecute him for lying about his his birth certificate. And it was all about their effort to investigate, in Guatemala, and it really didn't pertain. There really wasn't anything there. The one interesting thing that came out of that, though, was that apparently Jim Garrison had requested that files that were taken by the FBI the weekend that Ferrie was killed or died, he wanted them back. They had been seized, and I didn't realize that he had asked for those. So that's the other thing that Pam Bondi can do is we have to get the Walter Sheridan files, because those are the files. Walter Sheridan was a right-hand man of Bobby Kennedy. He did his own investigation. Those records were put into the JFK library, and then when the ARB asked for them, they were sent to NBC. And Walter Sheridan claimed that he did this as part of an NBC investigation on Garrison. So the Marcello tapes are really important. We have to get them released, and we're pressing for that. And the Walter Sheridan from the Department of Justice. And also, I think NBC has some films of the day of the assassination, the Darnell film and the Wegman film, that could possibly be exculpatory for Oswald. I don't know if they are, but they could be, and we want them to be 3D animated. To have them evaluated so that we can determine that. I have some forensic evidence I would like them to study. I don't know if we have time for that, but in the late 90s, someone discovered that there was organic material on the bullet fragments that were found in the limo, and we determined that they were human. And then the next step was to determine whose tissue is that, and is it John Connally or is it President Kennedy? Because if it's John Connally, then that demolishes the single bullet theory. We'd like to get some DNA tests done using modern technology, and I'd like to get some 3D analysis done on the bullets, all the bullets, and the rifle, because in 1978, when the HSCA fired the rifle, the bullets in 1978 did not match the bullets from 1964. They claimed it was because the rifle had changed over the years, but subsequently we have learned that rifling does not change even if you fire a rifle 1,000 times. So there's something fishy about why the bullets in 1978 did not match the bullets in 1964. These are the kind of things that we'd really love to have Luna. I know she doesn't have the authorization, this is funding, but maybe the Department of Justice can do this. By the way, we understand that her task force was supposed to expire at the end of the month, and we have heard through the grapevine that it's been extended another 6 months.
That is also my understanding as well. When we refer to Carlos Marcello, for those who don't know, he was the mobster who dominated the mob in both Texas and Louisiana. And when Larry speaks of the ARB, he's speaking of the Assassinations Review Board. You can see why we had him join us today. He has raised a number of significant questions, particularly that of the NBC film. As my understanding, NBC is trying to overload Luna with extraneous film, but I think she will get to the bottom. I want to thank our guest, Larry Schnapf, one of the country's leading experts on the Kennedy assassination, for joining us today, and we'll have him back as things develop. Larry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Roger. Good luck and have a good day.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. 77 WABC invites you to a family fun day and softball showdown on July 20th with net proceeds benefiting Shriners Children's. John Sterling will call the game as the FDNY takes on the NYPD with special guests Dwight Gooden, Art Shamsky, 77 WABC hosts including Sid Rosenberg, Anthony Cumia, Lionel, Dominic Carter, and many more. For more info and to buy tickets, go to ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org. That's ShrinersChildren'sChampions.org.